In the vastness of space, the Galactic Concord had long reigned supreme. A coalition of ancient species, their power was matched only by their adherence to ritualized combat, a way of waging war designed to maintain balance. For centuries, they fought the relentless Kralax horde, a vicious insectoid race that threatened to consume the galaxy. Yet the wars dragged on, locked in a stalemate. But now, desperation gripped a faction within the Concord. The conflict had drained resources, morale was waning, and the Concord sought a new edge. They turned their eyes toward the outer fringes of the galaxy, toward Earth. To the Concord, humanity was insignificant. Isolated for millennia, Earth was just another primitive world, quarantined to prevent their interference with galactic politics. Their technology was assumed rudimentary, their biology fragile. And so, a fleet was dispatched, a small show of force intended to remind humanity of their place. The fleet arrived in Earth's orbit, their ships casting long shadows over the planet below. Broadcasts were sent in dozens of alien languages, demanding Earth's immediate surrender. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, humanity responded. It wasn't with the fearful pleas for mercy that the Concord expected, nor the diplomatic overtures of a species eager to avoid destruction. Instead, Earth's leaders responded with something far more chilling: efficiency. Communications went dark. Factories that had once produced consumer goods and machinery were swiftly repurposed. Weapons of war, dormant for decades, were brought online. Armies were raised, not in panic, but in cold, calculated preparation. The invasion began in earnest. The Concord fleet moved to subdue Earth's defenses, expecting little resistance. But instead of the paltry ships they had imagined, they were met by a different reality. Human warships, sleek and heavily armored, rose from the planet's surface like hornets swarming to defend their hive. The first skirmish was over in moments. Concord vessels, expecting an easy victory, found themselves outmaneuvered, outgunned. Their shielding technology, thought to be impenetrable, failed under the relentless assault of human kinetic weapons and energy blasts. Ships exploded, their debris scattering through the cold vacuum of space. On the ground, humanity mobilized. Soldiers from every nation, every walk of life, were called to arms. Some were veterans, others fresh recruits, but all shared a single purpose: survival. Factories that had once been silent for decades roared to life. Tanks, aircraft, drones, tools of war that hadn't seen use in years, were produced en masse. It was as if the planet itself was gearing for total war. The Concord, shocked by the scale of resistance, sent reinforcements. Larger ships, more advanced weaponry. But it didn't matter. Humanity adapted. Each defeat was a lesson. Every destroyed ship was a blueprint for improvement. Within days, Earth's forces were not just holding the line, they were winning. The Concord's forces were fractured. Their command structure, built on the slow deliberation of a council, couldn't keep up with the rapid pace of human warfare. Communications broke down. Orders became confused. And all the while, the humans pressed their advantage, relentless and unyielding. In orbit, human warships turned the tide. The invincible Concord fleet, once the terror of 1,000 worlds, was reduced to smoldering wreckage. And for the first time in millennia, the Concord felt something they had forgotten long ago: fear. The few Concord survivors limped away from Earth's gravity well, their ships damaged, their pride shattered. They had expected a backwater planet with a fragile species, not a war machine that could challenge the galaxy's greatest powers. Back in the Concord's central command, panic rippled through the council chambers. Reports of Earth's defiance spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Species that had once dismissed humanity as irrelevant now took notice. What had started as a routine conquest had awakened a monster. And humanity, once isolated, was now fully engaged. Word of humanity's resistance spread like a shockwave through the galaxy. Species that had once dismissed Earth as a mere speck in the galactic fringe now whispered tales of their sudden and violent emergence. No one could believe it. This minor species, long ignored, had defeated the Concord's invasion force in mere days. But the true surprise was yet to come. In the halls of the Galactic Concord, disbelief turned to alarm. Strategists and generals, who had grown complacent over centuries of ritualized combat, scrambled to understand how a species with no presence on the galactic stage could possess such overwhelming military power. The answer came swiftly. Humanity fought in a way that no other species did. They fought for total victory. While the Concord deliberated, humanity acted. Their war machine, once dormant, now moved with a purpose that astonished the galaxy. Earth became a fortress, its skies filled with warships, its cities humming with the sound of factories working at a pace unseen since ancient galactic conflicts. Where the Concord took decades to rebuild fleets, humanity did it in weeks. What truly set humanity apart, however, wasn't just their speed or their industrial capacity, it was their mindset. The Concord had long fought with strict rules of engagement, valuing honor and restraint to prevent the kind of destruction that could spiral out of control. But humanity followed no such codes. To them, war was war, brutal, unrelenting, and absolute. As the next wave of Concord forces arrived, hoping to overwhelm Earth's defenses with sheer numbers, they quickly learned that they were not fighting a traditional foe. Human ships didn't line up in neat formations or engage in the slow, methodical tactics the Concord had mastered. Instead, they moved unpredictably, using guerrilla tactics and hit-and-run maneuvers to devastating effect. Concord admirals, unprepared for this kind of warfare, watched in horror as entire fleets were decimated by human forces that struck and vanished before a counterattack could even be planned. On the ground, things were no different. Human soldiers, armed with advanced weaponry and battlefield tactics honed through centuries of conflict on their home planet, fought with a ferocity the Concord troops had never encountered. Their armor was lighter, their weapons more versatile, and their coordination seamless. Every human soldier seemed to embody a grim determination that drove them forward, regardless of the odds. One by one, planets near Earth's borders fell. The Concord, struggling to adapt to humanity's brutal efficiency, sent more and more resources into the conflict, but it was like throwing fuel on a wildfire. The more they fought, the more humanity adapted, learned, and grew stronger. With every battle, the human war machine became more refined, more efficient. And their victories were not just physical, they were psychological. The fear began to spread. Stories of human berserkers, soldiers who fought without fear and with a savage tenacity, became the stuff of legend. Alien commanders spoke in hushed tones about how a single human could turn the tide of a battle, fighting with an intensity that bordered on madness. The Concord, once the dominant force in the galaxy, now faced an enemy unlike any they had ever known. An enemy that didn't just want to win, they wanted to destroy. Even more terrifying was humanity's technological adaptability. Where most species in the galaxy had long perfected their war machines, relying on centuries of refined designs and tested strategies, humanity thrived on innovation. Each battle saw new tactics, new weapons, new technology. Humanity was evolving faster than anyone could keep up with. Concord ships, once considered state-of-the-art, were now little more than cannon fodder for human fleets that had developed energy shields, kinetic railguns, and devastating missile systems at a pace that defied all logic. As humanity pushed further into space, the Concord realized they were facing an existential threat. The rules of war no longer applied. There were no ceasefires, no negotiations, only destruction. Entire fleets were wiped out in hours, planets bombarded from orbit with ruthless precision. For the first time in centuries, the Concord began to fracture. Some species, seeing the writing on the wall, pulled their forces back, refusing to throw more lives into the furnace of human warfare. Others sought desperate alliances with humanity, hoping to avoid annihilation by pledging their support. And then there were those who, in the face of this relentless new enemy, began to wonder if humanity might be the galaxy's last hope against the Kralax horde. The galaxy watched as the war escalated. What had started as a minor skirmish over an isolated planet was now spiraling into a full-scale galactic conflict. And at the center of it all was humanity, a species that had been underestimated for so long, now rising to become the dominant military force in the galaxy. But humanity's relentless advance carried with it a growing question: how far would they go? What price were they willing to pay for victory? And as they continued to crush their enemies, some began to whisper that the galaxy was witnessing not just the rise of a new power, but the birth of something far more dangerous, a force that might never stop, even once the war was won. The galaxy trembled as humanity's war machine expanded, consuming everything in its path. Species that once viewed Earth with indifference now looked to their borders in dread. What had begun as a skirmish was becoming a galactic reshaping, and humanity showed no signs of stopping. Some of the most powerful members of the Galactic Concord began to reconsider their position. Negotiation, once seen as a weakness in the face of such brutal opposition, now seemed like the only option. The Concord's council convened in secret, desperate to find a way to halt the human advance before it became unstoppable. They debated endlessly, torn between pride and pragmatism. Could they really negotiate with a species they had once considered so far beneath them? And if they did, would humanity even listen? But humanity wasn't interested in negotiations. They had been attacked, and now they were answering with overwhelming force. The Terran Union, the newly formed coalition of human forces and their allies, grew stronger by the day. Humanity didn't just fight for territory, they fought for total domination. Their battles weren't about holding ground or maintaining borders, they were about annihilating their enemies, leaving no room for future threats. Former enemies of the Concord, those who had been subjugated for centuries, saw an opportunity in humanity's rise. They, too, had suffered under the weight of the Concord's rigid rule, and now they saw a chance to break free. One by one, these oppressed species reached out to humanity, seeking an alliance. And humanity, always pragmatic, accepted their offers. The Terran Union expanded, absorbing these new allies into its ranks. But it was clear from the beginning who led this alliance: humanity. The humans had earned their place as the dominant force in this coalition, and the galaxy's former underdogs were more than willing to follow, as long as it meant freedom from the Concord's grasp. The most significant and unlikely alliance came with the Kralax horde, a species known for its brutal and relentless nature. The Kralax had been the galaxy's greatest threat before humanity entered the war, their endless swarms overwhelming every foe they faced. But even they recognized something in humanity that gave them pause: an equal, perhaps even a superior, predator. The Kralax, who respected strength above all else, saw in humanity a kindred spirit. They did not see them as an enemy to be destroyed, but as an opponent worthy of respect. And so, in an unprecedented move, the Kralax reached out to humanity. The proposal was simple: an alliance of two unstoppable forces, united in their hatred of the Galactic Concord. Together, they would bring the old empires to their knees. The galaxy shuddered once more, not just because of the violence that would ensue, but because of the sheer audacity of such an alliance. For the Concord, the idea of humanity and the Kralax uniting was a nightmare beyond imagining. The Kralax were a scourge that had ravaged countless worlds, and now they were aligning themselves with the most unpredictable species in the galaxy. There would be no safe haven, no strategy that could withstand the combined might of these two forces. And indeed, as the alliance was sealed, humanity and the Kralax launched a coordinated assault on key Concord systems. The galaxy, which had known a certain balance for centuries, was plunged into chaos. Planets that had stood proud for millennia fell in days. Concord fleets, built over centuries, were shattered in hours. The once mighty empires that had ruled over countless worlds now faced the possibility of complete extinction. But the alliance wasn't just about brute force. It was about strategy. Humanity, with its unmatched technological ingenuity, provided the precision and innovation the Kralax had always lacked. Where the Kralax had relied on overwhelming numbers, humanity brought calculated strikes, targeting key infrastructure and leadership with devastating effectiveness. It wasn't long before the cracks in the Galactic Concord became too large to ignore. Some species, seeing the writing on the wall, began to abandon their posts. They withdrew their fleets, retreating into isolation in the hopes that they might survive by staying out of the conflict entirely. Others, desperate and afraid, attempted to broker peace with the Terran Union, offering vast concessions in exchange for mercy. But humanity had no interest in mercy. Their message was clear: the galaxy would be remade in their image, or it would burn. There would be no peace until the Galactic Concord was broken, its leaders brought to their knees. For those within the Concord who remained loyal, the situation grew more dire by the day. The old tactics no longer worked. Humanity's adaptability and the Kralax's relentless assault left them with few options. Even the most fortified worlds, long thought impregnable, fell under the combined might of this terrifying new alliance. As the Terran Union marched forward, its influence spread. Species that had once been too weak or too isolated to resist the Concord now joined the Union in droves. They saw in humanity something they had never seen in the Concord: hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for a future free from oppression. But with that hope came fear. Humanity's dominance, while liberating for some, was terrifying for others. They had seen how humans fought, how they crushed their enemies without hesitation. Would the galaxy ever be the same once humanity had finished their conquest? And what would happen once the Concord was gone? Would humanity turn on its allies, or would they truly bring a new era of peace? For now, those questions remained unanswered. The only certainty was that the galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the center of that change. As the war raged on, the members of the Terran Union looked to their human leaders for guidance, knowing that whatever came next, it would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. And the Galactic Concord, once so sure of its dominance, could do nothing but watch as the inevitable drew closer. The remnants of the Galactic Concord gathered in desperation, their once unshakable confidence shattered by the relentless advance of humanity and its allies. The High Council, now fractured and panicked, scrambled for solutions that no longer existed. Whispers of surrender began circulating among the more pragmatic members, but the hardliners refused to accept the reality before them. They clung to the belief that they could still turn the tide, that somehow, someway, they would find a way to stop the Terran Union. But even in their most secret meetings, the truth was clear to all: humanity had changed the game forever. The Concord's leaders had once believed that their centuries of dominance would be enough to withstand any challenge. They had grown complacent, underestimating Earth's seemingly primitive inhabitants. And now, they paid the price for their hubris. The war councils became more frantic with each passing day. Generals and admirals presented strategies that had worked in past conflicts, only to have them dismissed outright. Every plan was rendered useless by humanity's unpredictability. Their forces moved faster than expected, striking where they were least anticipated. Concord fleets that had once operated with impunity in the galaxy were now nothing more than scattered fragments of their former selves, trying to hold together against a relentless tide. There was no pattern to humanity's assaults, no predictable rhythm the Concord could exploit. Their enemy adapted too quickly, leaving the Council's most experienced tacticians bewildered. Some suspected that humans were using advanced algorithms or some form of enhanced intelligence, but the truth was far simpler, and far more terrifying. Humanity didn't need complex systems to outthink the Concord. They relied on their natural ingenuity, their instinctive ability to fight against impossible odds and find a way to win. The humans had always been underestimated. From the very beginning, the Concord had viewed them as a lesser species, capable of little more than planetary squabbles. But now, the galaxy saw the truth. Humanity was not merely a collection of individuals fighting for survival. They were a force, unified in their purpose, driven by a determination that none could match. Within the heart of the Terran Union, there was no fear, no hesitation. Humanity had tasted victory, and they would not stop until the galaxy was theirs. The old empires were crumbling, and where there had once been powerful dynasties and ancient species, there was now only the shadow of humanity's unstoppable march. The war was not fought just in space, but in the hearts and minds of the galaxy's inhabitants. The stories of humanity's triumphs spread like wildfire, filling the airwaves and data streams with tales of impossible victories. Planets that had once feared the Terran Union now welcomed its forces, hoping to be spared the fate that had befallen the Concord's loyalist worlds. And yet, even as humanity's influence spread, there were whispers of something darker beneath the surface. The Terran Union's conquest had not come without cost. The human leaders had made sacrifices, both strategic and moral, to achieve their goals. Worlds had been scorched, populations displaced, and entire species left in ruins as the Union carved its path across the stars. Among humanity's allies there were growing concerns. Some began to wonder if they had traded one oppressor for another. The Kralax horde, despite their alliance with the humans, continued to operate with ruthless efficiency, wiping out entire fleets and leaving little in their wake. The balance of power within the Union itself was fragile, held together by a mutual need for survival and victory. But despite these tensions, the Union's success could not be denied. Humanity had done the impossible. They had reshaped the galaxy in their image. Where once there had been a scattered collection of independent worlds, there was now a unified force, bound together by the will of the Terran Union. As the last of the Concord's strongholds fell, its leaders were forced into hiding. The mighty empires that had ruled for millennia were reduced to little more than footnotes in the history of the galaxy. Their fleets, once symbols of power and authority, now drifted aimlessly, remnants of a forgotten age. For those who had survived the war, there was no time to mourn the fallen. The galaxy was now under new management, and the Terran Union had no interest in allowing old rivalries to fester. They moved quickly to consolidate their power, establishing new laws and systems to ensure that no other force could rise to challenge them. Yet, for all their victories, humanity was still human. The scars of war ran deep, not just among their enemies, but within their own ranks. Soldiers who had fought for years on the front lines returned home to find their worlds irrevocably changed. The promises of peace and prosperity were slow to materialize, and for many, the trauma of battle was not so easily forgotten. The leaders of the Union faced an uncertain future. They had won the war, but now they had to win the peace. The galaxy, for all its newfound unity, was still a fragile place, and the threat of rebellion loomed on the horizon. Not all were content to live under humanity's rule, and whispers of dissent could be heard in the far reaches of space. But for now, those whispers were just that, whispers. Humanity's victory was absolute, and any who dared challenge the Terran Union would be met with the same force that had brought down the Galactic Concord. The galaxy, once so full of promise and potential, had been remade, and its future now belonged to humanity. The Terran Union's flag flew over countless worlds, a symbol of a new era. For some, it represented hope and liberation. For others, it was a reminder of the price that had been paid. But regardless of one's perspective, there was no denying the truth. The galaxy had changed, and humanity was at the helm. The final chapter of the Galactic Concord had been written, and a new chapter had begun. What would come next was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the era of humanity had arrived, and it showed no signs of ending any time soon.